She stood at the gate, confused and humiliated. Her ticket torn in front of dozens of strangers, but what that flight attendant didn't know was that this nobody girl was the airline owner's daughter. Amara stood at the entrance of Gate 47, her sneakers slightly damp from the morning rain, her fingers nervously gripping the worn strap of her backpack. She was 15, slender and tall for her age, with skin the color of warm cinnamon and curls tucked into a tight bun that had begun to fray from the long cab ride. Her dress was simple, navy blue with a white collar, something her mother picked out to make a good impression. "You're meeting your father," she had said. "Look like the young lady I raised." It was Amara's first flight alone, first time flying at all. Her ticket was neatly folded in the front pocket of her backpack, printed by the airline itself. She had memorized every instruction, triple-checked her gate. She wasn't about to mess this up. As she stepped into the terminal, she felt the eyes, some indifferent, others curious, but one pair, sharp, blue and cold, followed her like a spotlight. It belonged to a woman in a crisp navy uniform, a flight attendant, mid-50s, platinum blonde hair tied into a tight bun. Her name tag read Karen, and her eyes narrowed the moment she saw Amara. Karen didn't smile. She took a slow step toward the counter, where Amara was approaching to ask a simple question, just to confirm boarding time. But before the girl could speak, Karen interrupted, her voice low and clipped. "Can I help you?" Amara nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm on flight 383 to Atlanta. Just wanted to make sure I'm in the right place." Karen looked her over from head to toe. Her eyes landed on the frayed backpack, then flicked to Amara's face. She didn't answer. Instead, she held out her hand. "Ticket." Amara dug into her backpack, pulled it out, and offered it with both hands. Karen took it without a word. There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause. Karen's brow furrowed as she examined the ticket. Then, without looking up, she said coldly, "This doesn't look real." Amara blinked. "I printed it through the airline. It's what they emailed my—" But Karen wasn't listening. "This isn't a valid boarding pass," she declared loud enough for people around them to hear. "I've seen this trick before." Before Amara could protest, Karen ripped the ticket in half, clean, deliberate. The sound echoed in Amara's ears louder than the overhead announcements. For a second, the terminal went quiet. Amara's heart dropped into her stomach. A few people looked up from their phones. One man tilted his head. A child nearby stopped sipping his juice box. I didn't..." Amara tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "That was my only copy." Karen crossed her arms. "You can't just show up here with a fake ticket and expect to get on a plane. Where's your guardian?" "My dad. He's meeting me in Atlanta. He booked it." "I'm sure he did," Karen said, eyes full of condescension. "Sweetheart, you can't just say someone bought you a ticket and expect us to believe it." Amara's throat tightened. She felt heat behind her eyes, but blinked it back. She would not cry, not here, not in front of this woman. She stepped aside, reaching for her phone to call her mother. Her hands shook. Behind her, a passenger, an older black man in a charcoal suit, stood and walked toward the counter. He had seen enough. "Excuse me," he said firmly. "I was sitting right over there. That young lady was polite, clear, and did nothing wrong. You just tore up her ticket without even checking the system." Karen stiffened. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "Oh, it does now," he replied, "because I'm recording." He held up his phone. Karen's face paled, and just like that, the ripple began. Amara stood still, holding back tears, her fingers curled into her palms as she stared at the torn paper in Karen's hand. What no one in that terminal knew, not Karen, not the curious onlookers, not even the man with the phone, was that Amara's last name wasn't listed on that ticket for a reason. Because her father was Thomas Whitaker, chairman and CEO of the very airline they were about to fly, and he was about to find out what had just happened to his daughter. Amara Whitaker was used to being unnoticed. At school, she was the quiet one, the girl who always turned in her assignments early, who sat near the back but never quite in the shadows. Her teachers loved her handwriting. Her classmates barely remembered her name. She wasn't invisible because she wanted to be. It was because for most of her life, it was safer that way. Amara lived with her mother, Denise, in a modest apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. A nurse by day and a dreamer by night, Denise did everything she could to raise her daughter with grace, dignity, and love, even when money was tight and the world seemed determined to test them. She never spoke badly about Amara's father. In fact, she barely spoke of him at all. All Amara knew was this: her father was rich, important, busy, and absent. His name was never written on school forms, never on birthday cards. When Amara once asked at age 7, "Does Daddy love me?" Denise had answered, "Of course he does, baby. He just doesn't know how to show it." Amara had stopped asking after that. But now, at 15, something had changed. One evening, Denise came home from a double shift with tired eyes, but a strange tremble in her hands. She handed Amara her phone and said, "He called." "Who?" Amara asked, though she already knew. "Your father. He wants to see you. In person." There was silence. Amara's heart thudded. "I told him it was your decision," Denise said, voice soft. "I won't make it for you." Amara had gone to her room, shut the door, and stared at her ceiling for over an hour. She didn't know how to feel. Angry, excited, afraid. It had been 12 years since she'd seen him, and she didn't remember his face clearly, just that he wore expensive cologne and had a laugh that used to fill a room. But what did he want now? In the end, curiosity won. She said yes. The airline ticket arrived 2 days later, emailed directly to her mother's inbox. Business class, one way to Atlanta, with an open return. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "Looks like someone's trying to impress you." Amara had only nodded. She didn't care about the seat or the airline lounge or the fancy name printed on the ticket. What mattered was that, for once, her father had reached out. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he wanted to know her now. That's why she had dressed the way she did that morning, brushing the wrinkles from her navy blue dress with nervous hands, tying her curls back the way her mom liked, and slipping on the shoes that pinched her toes, but looked appropriate. She wanted to make a good first impression, even if it was 15 years late. The taxi ride to the airport was long and quiet. Denise didn't speak much. She kept glancing at her daughter like she was memorizing her. At the curbside drop-off, Denise hugged Amara so tightly she couldn't breathe. "Text me when you land," she whispered. "And if anything feels wrong, call me. You don't owe him anything just because he's your father." "I know," Amara said, trying to sound braver than she felt. She walked into the terminal with her chin up and her heart pounding. And now, here she was, humiliated and confused, facing a woman who had torn up her ticket like it meant nothing. She didn't even know if she'd be allowed on the plane anymore. She didn't know that her father, Thomas Whitaker, had just paused a board meeting at the airline's headquarters because his assistant showed him a trending video. His daughter, crying in an airport, her ticket in shreds, and he didn't yet know that his actions, years of silence, of neglect, were about to be confronted in the most public way possible. For Amara, this flight was never just a journey from one city to another. It was a bridge between two lifetimes, one where she had been forgotten and one where she might finally be seen. The counter staff had quiet codes they used when they didn't want to say what they really meant. A sideways glance, a change in tone, a half smile that didn't reach the eyes. Karen was fluent in all of them. After tearing Amara's ticket, Karen returned to the counter as if she hadn't just humiliated a young girl. She leaned in toward her colleague. a younger flight attendant named Cheryl, and spoke just loud enough for the nearest passengers to catch a whisper. She just walked in like she belonged here. Cheryl glanced toward Amara, still standing off to the side, holding her phone like a lifeline. Her eyes were red, her hands trembled. "Are you sure the ticket was fake?" Cheryl asked under her breath. Karen raised an eyebrow. "You saw her. That backpack, those shoes. Do you really think she flies business class? Please?" Cheryl hesitated. Something about Amara didn't sit right with her, not in the way Karen meant. There was a quiet dignity in the girl's posture, a held-back storm behind her eyes. She didn't look like someone who was trying to sneak onto a plane. She looked like someone who had just been wounded. But Karen was already typing at the computer, her voice sharper now. "We're not letting people game the system. Not on my watch. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what fake looks like." A few feet away, Amara overheard every word. She wanted to scream, but the words caught in her throat. All she could do was text her mother. "They tore up my ticket. She said it looked fake." The reply came fast. "What? Stay calm. I'm calling the airline now." Just then, a man in a suit stepped up to the counter. Tall, early 60s, with a silver beard and a badge clipped to his coat. Operations manager. His name was Leonard Hayes, and he had been summoned by one of the gate agents who'd overheard Karen's outburst. "I need to know what's going on here," Leonard said, his voice calm but firm. Karen straightened. "We had a situation with a passenger attempting to board with a suspicious ticket." Leonard turned toward Amara. "That young lady?" he asked. Karen nodded. "Yes. Claimed someone booked it for her. It didn't match the manifest." "That's a serious claim," Leonard said. "Did you scan it?" Karen blinked. "No, I didn't get that far." Leonard frowned. "So you didn't confirm anything before destroying it?" Karen looked away. It was clearly not legitimate. Leonard exhaled slowly. "We're going to need her full name." From behind, Amara stepped forward. "Amara Whitaker," Leonard typed quickly into his tablet, pulling up the flight's manifest. His eyes froze for a second. He looked back at her, then at the screen again. "Is your father's name Thomas Whitaker?" he asked carefully. Amara nodded. Leonard went pale. Without another word, he turned and walked briskly toward the service phone at the corner of the gate. Karen stared after him, confused. "What's going on?" she asked Cheryl, who now looked visibly uncomfortable. But Cheryl said nothing. The man who had started recording earlier approached Amara quietly. "Sweetheart, you okay?" Amara nodded weakly. "Don't let them scare you. You didn't do anything wrong." She looked up at him. "Thank you." Just then, the overhead PA system clicked on. "Would passenger Amara Whitaker please remain at gate 47? A senior executive is on the way to meet you." Karen's face drained of color. Passengers around the gate began whispering. Did they just say executive? "What's going on?" Amara stood still, heart racing, because in that moment it became clear. This wasn't over, and soon everyone would know the truth about who she was and who had just tried to erase her. The edges of the terminal seemed to blur around Amara. The voices around her turned into a muffled hum, as if she were underwater. Her torn ticket hung limply in her hand, its jagged edge fluttering slightly from the air vents above gate 47. Karen, now visibly nervous, busied herself at the computer, pretending not to notice the growing crowd. But the looks were coming from everywhere. Passengers, other staff, even a flight captain who had just walked by and paused mid-step to study the tension at the counter. Cheryl whispered again, "Karen, something's not right. Her last name is Whitaker." Karen scoffed under her breath, still trying to regain her ground. Whitaker is a common name. This is just some mix-up. But Karen didn't know that the man now walking briskly down the terminal, flanked by two security personnel, was none other than Thomas Whitaker himself, CEO of one of the largest airlines in the United States. He had left his boardroom mid-sentence when he saw the video. It wasn't just a trending clip, it was his daughter. The terminal doors parted and he stepped through. Immaculately dressed in a tailored grey suit with a tie the color of deep burgundy and shoes that barely made a sound on the polished floor, Thomas carried a presence that made people step aside instinctively. He spotted her instantly. Amara. Her face, so much like her mother's, yet unmistakably his. Older than he remembered. Stronger, standing so still, so alone. His stomach twisted. Karen didn't notice him at first. She was still defending herself to Leonard, who was now pacing behind the counter, talking rapidly on the phone. "I followed protocol," Karen insisted. "I had every right to question the ticket. It didn't look like our format." Thomas's voice cut through the noise like a blade, calm, low and piercing. "You had no right to humiliate her." Karen turned, froze. Leonard dropped the phone, his eyes wide. Silence fell over the gate. Thomas stepped closer, eyes locked on Karen. "Is this the employee?" Leonard nodded. "Yes, sir, this is Karen. I saw the video," Thomas said. "I heard her tone. I saw her tear up that ticket in front of my daughter." Karen's lips parted. "Your daughter?" Thomas turned to Amara. Her eyes were glossy but held steady. He saw so much in that gaze. Years of absence, years of wondering, years of waiting for this moment. "I'm sorry," he said softly, voice cracking. "I should have come sooner." Amara didn't speak. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of disbelief and guarded pain. Karen took a step back. "Sir, I had no way of knowing. I thought—" "You thought wrong," Thomas snapped. Then, after a breath, he added more calmly, "You didn't ask. You judged. You saw a young black girl traveling alone in a dress you didn't approve of and assumed the worst." The crowd around them was silent, watching every word, every movement. Thomas turned to the passengers. "I want to apologize to every person who witnessed this today. What happened here does not reflect the values of our airline or this company." Cheryl stepped forward. "Mr. Whitaker, if I may, she was the only one who questioned the ticket. I wanted to scan it." Thomas nodded. "Thank you. We'll sort this out. But first..." He turned to Amara again, softer now. "Would you come with me?" Amara hesitated, then stepped forward. She stood in front of the man she hadn't seen in over a decade. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why now?" Thomas didn't pretend to have a perfect answer. "Because I was a coward for too long, and because when I saw what happened to you, something inside me broke." Amara looked at him. For a moment, no words passed. Just the silent throb of a connection trying to find itself again. Then she nodded. He extended his hand. She took it. Gasps and murmurs spread through the terminal. Cameras clicked. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. Karen stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. But Amara wasn't thinking about Karen anymore. She was thinking about the man beside her, the stranger who was her father, and what this meant. Because her story had just changed forever. Long before he was the man who commanded boardrooms and walked through terminals with silent authority, Thomas Whitaker had once been a 29-year-old kid with a dream and a suitcase full of ambition. He had nothing when he first started, just a degree in aviation management, a hunger to build something of his own, and a fear of becoming like his own father, distant, angry, and drunk on power. Ironically, that's exactly who he had become. Back in 2009, before the limos and corner offices, Thomas had been living in Charlotte, working 12-hour shifts for a mid-sized carrier that would one day become the foundation of his empire. It was there that he met Denise, Amara's mother. She was unlike anyone he'd ever known, graceful, grounded, and unimpressed by wealth, Denise had worked as a flight nurse and spent her evenings reading old novels, listening to jazz, and sipping sweet tea from a chipped porcelain mug. Thomas fell hard. For a while it was perfect. Quiet dates at the park, laughs over takeout, nights when they would dream about futures neither of them fully believed in. And then Amara came. Denise told him she was pregnant on a rainy Tuesday. Thomas had stood silent in their tiny apartment kitchen, hands shaking, unsure whether he felt joy or terror. But before he could make sense of anything, life changed. An unexpected merger, a promotion that required constant travel, then another. The stakes got higher, his schedule more chaotic. His ambition, a fire that had once been noble, began to consume everything. Denise gave him a choice: be present or be powerful. He chose wrong. He convinced himself he was doing it for them, that he'd send money, that someday, when the company was built, he'd make it all right. But the years passed, and someday became a broken promise. Calls turned into emails, then into silence. He hadn't seen Amara since she was 3. The guilt lived in him like a shadow. He kept her name off company records to protect her, or so he told himself. But the truth was uglier. He didn't want the press knowing he had a daughter he never spoke of. And now the very system he'd built, the airline that bore his name, had turned on her. When Thomas saw that video, he didn't see a PR crisis. He saw his failure staring back at him in the eyes of a 15-year-old girl who deserved so much better. And in that moment, none of the titles mattered. Not chairman, not CEO. Only one title screamed in his mind: father. Now, seated with Amara in a quiet executive lounge just steps from the chaos, he studied her in the soft light. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on the floor. "I didn't know how to fix it," he said quietly. "So I did nothing. That was cowardly. I'm sorry, Amara." She didn't respond. "I watched you grow up from a distance," he continued. "Every year I'd think, this is the year I'll go see her. This is the year I'll call." And I never did. Amara finally looked at him. Her eyes were unreadable, but steady. "You could have picked up the phone," she said. "One time." "I know," he said, "and you have every right to be angry." She exhaled slowly. "I'm not angry. I'm just tired of wondering what I did wrong." That hit him harder than anything she could have shouted. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said, voice cracking. "You were just a little girl. I was the one who ran." A long pause. Then she asked, "Why now?" Thomas leaned forward. "Because today, I saw the world treat you like you didn't belong. And it shattered me. Not just because it was cruel, but because I realized that I left you defenseless against it." Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. "I can't take back the years," he whispered, "but I swear to you I'm not going to waste another second." Amara didn't answer right away, but for the first time since the incident at the gate, she didn't look away. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was beginning to fill with something else: possibility. By the time Amara and her father sat down in the executive lounge, the video had already reached 1 million views. The footage, just 43 seconds long, had been posted by a young man named Jamal, a school teacher who had been on his way to visit his sister. He hadn't intended to go viral, he just couldn't stay silent. The caption read, "Flight attendant tears up a black teen's ticket. She stayed calm, I didn't." It took off like wildfire. In coffee shops and living rooms, on commuter trains and office desktops, people watched the scene unfold. The torn ticket, the shaky voice, the raw silence of a girl being judged without reason. By noon, hashtags like Ticket Justice and Who Is Amara trended across platforms. Celebrities began to repost it. Civil rights activists called for an apology. The airline's social media department scrambled. Inside corporate headquarters, PR executives paced conference rooms, fielding calls from reporters and board members. Someone finally asked the question everyone was avoiding. Is the girl in the video really Thomas Whitaker's daughter? The answer came minutes later, confirmed by internal records and a personal call from Thomas himself. Yes, that's Amara, my daughter. That single sentence turned the story from injustice into scandal. Karen, still at Gate 47, had been pulled aside by airport security and asked to surrender her badge. She kept asking the same question. How was I supposed to know? But that wasn't the point anymore. The question wasn't whether she knew, it was why she had acted the way she did, why she assumed, why she judged. Passengers waiting near Gate 47 began speaking up. A woman in her 70s recalled how she'd seen Amara try to explain herself like a grown woman in a child's body. A teenage boy described how embarrassed he felt that no one else had stepped in sooner. Leonard Hayes, the operations manager, remained near the gate, answering questions and trying to keep the situation calm. But the truth was, no one could contain it now. This had become bigger than one gate, one ticket, one incident. It was about something deeper. And then came the second video. Not from Jamal, but from a nearby airport employee who had filmed Thomas's arrival. The clip showed the CEO confronting Karen, standing beside the daughter he'd abandoned and reclaiming the role he should have never left. It ended with Amara quietly taking her father's hand. That image, two hands, finally meeting after years of distance, spread faster than the first video. One tweet simply read, "This is what accountability looks like. This is what love looks like too." In the lounge, Amara scrolled through her phone. She saw herself through the eyes of strangers. Some called her brave. Some called her a symbol. But she didn't feel like either. She was just a girl who wanted to meet her father. Thomas watched her closely, unsure whether to speak. Instead, he opened his own phone, heart pounding. His inbox was flooded. Executives, journalists, board members, everyone wanted a statement, an explanation, a plan. But Thomas only replied to one message. It was from Denise. "You owe her more than words. Don't forget that." He stared at the screen for a moment and then looked up at Amara. "I know you didn't ask for this," he said. "You didn't sign up to be a headline." Amara nodded. "I just wanted to know if you'd show up." Thomas didn't speak. He stood, walked across the room, and returned with something in his hand. A new boarding pass, first class. Her name printed perfectly at the top, Amara Whitaker. "Flight leaves in 40 minutes, he said gently. "I'd like to fly with you if you'll let me." Amara took the ticket, ran her fingers over her name. It wasn't the flight that mattered. It was the fact that, for once, someone had given her a seat without making her fight for it. She looked at him, then nodded. The quiet hum of the executive lounge couldn't drown out the noise inside Thomas Whitaker's head. For years, he had operated in absolutes, data, profit margins, schedules. There was little room in his life for hesitation, until now. Across from him sat the living proof that some choices can't be undone with apologies or influence. His daughter, watching him, waiting, and this time he wouldn't make her wait. Thomas reached for his phone, heart thudding, and pressed the contact marked Elliot B., General Counsel. It rang once before picking up. "Thomas, what's going on? The media—" "I want Karen Evans terminated," Thomas said, voice calm but cold. "Immediately. Grounds: discriminatory conduct, public embarrassment, breach of conduct code. Make it clear it's not just about my daughter, it's about every person she might have treated this way." Elliot paused. "You sure? That'll open us up to a lot of scrutiny." "I'm counting on it." Another pause. "Okay, I'll handle it." Thomas ended the call. Amara looked at him surprised. "You're firing her?" I'm holding her accountable, he said. Not just for you. For the girl who might show up next week. For the boy who's afraid to speak up. For every passenger she made feel small. She blinked slowly, processing. You really mean that? Thomas nodded. I do. And more than that, I'm changing the training protocols, implicit bias, compassion response, and a hotline that goes directly to my desk. Amara raised an eyebrow. Really? He smiled a little crookedly. Really? This isn't just about fixing a PR mess. This is about fixing me. They sat in silence again, but this time it was fuller, warmer. Outside the lounge, the boarding process began. Gate agents moved with renewed focus, some of them whispering quietly as Thomas and Amara stepped out. Cameras were still around, but security kept them at bay. When they reached the gate, Cheryl stood waiting. She handed Amara a new lanyard. VIP pass, Whitaker family. No scanning required, she said with a soft smile. Amara looked at it, then at her father. You know, she said quietly, for a guy who disappeared for 12 years, this is a pretty good first day. Thomas laughed. A genuine, almost boyish laugh. Then let's not waste it. As they walked down the jet bridge, side by side, the whispers grew behind them. But they didn't look back. Inside the aircraft, a private pod had been prepared. Windows stretched wide with sunlight pouring in, and a steward, nervous but kind, offered Amara sparkling water and warm towels. She sat beside her father, finally relaxing into her seat. He turned toward her, nervous again. You sure you want to do this? She shrugged. I'm not sure about anything, but I'm here. He nodded. I'll earn the rest. As the engines began to rumble and the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Thomas reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, square envelope. He handed it to Amara. What's this? She opened it. Inside was a photograph. A photo of her, age 3, wearing a birthday crown made of construction paper, icing on her cheeks, smiling at the camera. He had carried it in his wallet all these years. I never stopped looking at this, he said, even when I pretended I didn't care. Amara ran her thumb along the edges of the photo. Her eyes stung. As the plane lifted from the ground, she looked out the window, then back at her father. The past was behind them now, 30,000 feet and rising. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was flying alone. The wheels touched down with a quiet thud, the cabin lights shifting to a gentle glow as the seatbelt sign flickered off. Passengers stirred, stretching, reaching for overhead bags. But Amara remained still. She sat with her hands in her lap, the photo of her 3-year-old self tucked safely into her backpack. Beside her, Thomas glanced over, but said nothing. He could feel the tension in her shoulders, the quiet questions behind her eyes. They had flown together, yes, but this landing wasn't just on a runway, it was in each other's world. As the first-class cabin began to empty, a uniformed staff member approached. Mr. Whitaker, Gate 19 has been cleared per your request. You and Miss Whitaker will have full privacy for exit. Thomas nodded. Thank you. They stood slowly, Amara stepping into the aisle first. The walk through the jet bridge felt longer than the flight itself, each step echoing like a heartbeat in her chest. She could hear the rhythmic tap of her father's shoes behind her, steady, deliberate. When they emerged into Gate 19, it was empty. Just a single corridor flooded with natural light, tall windows on both sides, and a stillness that felt sacred. No press, no noise, just them. Thomas paused halfway through the gate, watching Amara walk ahead, the weight of the moment pressing on him harder than any boardroom decision he'd ever made. Amara, he said, voice low. She stopped, but didn't turn right away. He took a few steps closer, then reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small envelope. Different from the photo, thicker, handwritten. What's that? She asked. It's from your mother, he replied. That made her turn. He extended it, and she took it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. Denise's curves, her loops, the softness in every letter. "I called her," Thomas said quietly. "After the lounge, told her everything." "What did she say?" "That I better not waste this chance." Amara gave a small smile. "Sounds like her." They stood there for a long moment, surrounded by silence, holding the stillness between them like a fragile sculpture. Finally, Thomas spoke again. "I want to make something clear," he said. "You don't owe me forgiveness. Not today, not ever. That's yours to give if you choose, but I'll spend the rest of my life earning the right to be in yours." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw for the first time not just the man from the photo on Forbes magazine, but the man who had flaws and regrets. And now, finally, courage. "I don't know what you were hoping for," she said, "but I didn't come here to forgive you." Thomas's heart sank for a moment. "I came," she continued, "because I needed to see if you were still just a story someone told me, or if you were real." She took a breath. Her voice softened. "And you are." Thomas lowered his eyes, emotion tightening his throat. "Then maybe we can start from there," he said. She nodded. They walked the rest of the corridor side by side. No paparazzi, no entourage, no dramatic farewells. Just two people, slowly finding their way back to each other, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. Gate 19 wasn't just a terminal exit, it was the beginning of something new. By the time they reached the private hangar, the sky had begun to shift, pale blue melting into soft orange as the late afternoon sun dipped low over the Atlanta skyline. The air was quieter there, heavier with meaning. Waiting on the tarmac was a sleek, polished Gulfstream jet, one Thomas rarely used unless the situation demanded privacy. This one did. Thomas held the door open for Amara. She hesitated before stepping inside, the soft leather and warm walnut interior making her feel like she had entered someone else's life. And maybe, in a way, she had. As the engines hummed to life, Thomas took the seat across from her. A flight attendant offered drinks. Amara declined. She wasn't thirsty. She was holding too much already. Thomas adjusted his seat, clearly nervous despite his outward calm. "Do you know why I named the company Whitaker?" he asked. Amara shook her head. "It wasn't about legacy," he said. "It was about my mother. Her maiden name was White. She was the first person who ever told me to dream of something big, said one day I'd fly so far people would forget where I started." He looked down. "But I forgot something else along the way." Amara tilted her head. "What?" "That it means nothing to fly far if you don't have anyone waiting when you land." Silence filled the cabin. The hum of the engines deepened. Outside, the sky turned gold. Amara reached into her backpack and pulled out the envelope her mother had written. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning each word with trembling care. It was short. Denise had never been one for long letters. "My sweet Amara, you are stronger than both of us combined. If he is willing to meet you in truth, then meet him with your heart. Don't carry my anger, just carry yourself. Love always, Mom." She folded the letter, wiped her cheek, and looked at Thomas. "I think I'm ready to ask something." He straightened. "Anything." "Why didn't you come back sooner, before the company, before all the noise?" He exhaled slowly, hands clasped between his knees. "Because I was afraid of failing you, of failing her. I told myself I had to be perfect before I could come back. But the truth is, I used that as an excuse. I was selfish." She let the words hang there, then finally whispered, "You really did miss a lot." "I know," he said. "I missed your birthdays, your first day of school. I miss seeing you become who you are." He paused, tears rising. "But I'm here now, and I'll never stop showing up again." Amara reached for her phone. and opened the video of him defending her at the gate. She watched it again. The torn ticket, the confrontation, the moment he held her hand. And something shifted inside her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close, maybe belief. She looked out the window, the world now hundreds of feet below. As the jet leveled out, the seatbelt sign dinged off. The flight attendant brought a small tray, fresh fruit, chocolate, warm bread. Thomas smiled weakly. "Bit nicer than your first gate experience, huh?" Amara smirked. "Just a little." They both laughed. It was quiet, but it was real. The first of many, maybe. Outside, clouds drifted like soft memories, and the world below became smaller. Inside, a father and daughter sat across from each other, still strangers in some ways, but no longer lost. And somewhere over Georgia, between the sky and the silence, a bond began to take flight. 1 week later, the same gate where Amara had been humiliated looked entirely different. Gate 47 was now filled with signs that read, "Equity first" and "Everyone belongs here." A new training module had been launched across the entire Wit Air network, including a live seminar broadcast from the Atlanta headquarters. And on the screen, in front of tens of thousands of employees, stood Amara. She wasn't delivering a speech. She was sitting beside her father, answering one question from a young staff member in Chicago who had asked, "What do you want people to take away from what happened?" Amara thought for a moment. Then, steady and soft, she said, "That people carry more than luggage when they come to an airport. They carry fear, hope, love, grief, and sometimes they're holding themselves together with nothing but a thread. So, look again. Ask questions. Don't assume." The room was silent, but every heart was full. Beside her, Thomas looked down, overwhelmed. He had seen CEOs handle mergers with less pressure than this moment, and yet he knew this was the most important legacy he'd ever leave behind. After the stream ended, Amara stood near the window of the top floor, overlooking a runway stretching toward the horizon. Thomas walked over, holding 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with extra cream and sugar. "How'd I do?" she asked, taking hers. "Better than I ever could," he said. She smiled. "That's the point." Their relationship wasn't perfect. They were still learning how to speak to each other, still learning what to ask and what not to ask. But they were showing up, and that, Amara realized, was everything. Later that night, they returned to Charlotte together. Denise met them at baggage claim, arms crossed, wearing the same weary expression she'd worn when Thomas walked out years ago. He approached slowly, unsure what to say, but she broke the silence. She looked stronger. "She is," he said, "because of you." Amara watched them for a moment. There was pain, history, but there was also something else, peace. She took both their hands, one on each side, and led them out of the airport. No more tears, just 3 people walking through the sliding glass doors into the humid North Carolina night, and into something new. And just like that, a story that began with judgment and silence took flight into redemption and hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced something similar at an airport? A moment that changed everything? We'd love to hear it. Please consider supporting this channel with a super thanks, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And before you go, don't miss the next video coming up right now on screen. It's another unforgettable airport story that might just bring tears to your eyes. Thank you for watching, and keep believing in second chances.